It was a carefully constructed illusion Evelyn Reed had built for herself in the heart of Oak Creek Central Park. The crisp Colorado air, the distant, hazy outline of the Rockies, the laughter of children chasing a frisbee. It was all a temporary anesthetic for a mind that never truly rested. For 2 precious hours, she wasn't Evelyn Reed, the formidable defense attorney dubbed the Courtroom Queen by a grudging media. She was just a woman with a leather-bound copy of East of Eden resting in her lap, letting the sun warm her face. Then the lie was shattered by the shriek of tires. It wasn't a panicked screech, but an aggressive, territorial one. A police cruiser had swung to the curb with unnecessary force, its engine rumbling like a predator. 2 officers emerged. The first, older and thick-set with a sour downturn to his lips, moved with the swagger of a man who believed the world was his to police. The second was younger, leaner, his movements uncertain, his eyes constantly flicking toward his partner as if for a script. They ignored the families on checkered blankets, the joggers on the path, the teenagers laughing by the fountain. Their eyes, like heat-seeking missiles, locked onto the sole black woman sitting alone on a park bench. They locked onto her. The older officer, his name tag reading Miller, approached. His partner, Davis, hung back a step, a silent, uniformed shadow. "Ma'am." Miller's voice cut through the idyllic afternoon hum. The word was technically polite, but it was coated in a thick layer of condescension. "We need to have a word with you." Evelyn slowly placed a bookmark between the pages of her novel. She looked up, her expression calm, her mind already shifting gears from the Salinas Valley to the hostile territory of an unwarranted stop. "Of course, officer," she said, her voice smooth and even. "How can I help you?" "We've had a report," Miller said, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, "of suspicious activity in this area." A flicker of disbelief, quickly suppressed. Suspicious activity? Her gaze swept the park. The children, the picnickers, the golden retriever chasing its tail. "My activity? Reading?" "I see," she replied, her tone neutral. "I can't say I've noticed anything out of the ordinary." "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Miller pressed, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "I'm enjoying the park, reading my book." She held it up slightly, a silent testament to her mundane activity. "We're going to need to see some ID," he demanded, not asked. This was the pivot point, the moment where compliance could be mistaken for weakness and assertion of rights could be twisted into provocation. She had coached hundreds of clients through this exact scenario. Stay calm, don't make sudden movements. Know the law, but know the man in front of you better. "May I ask why, officer?" she asked, her voice still level. "Am I being detained? Am I suspected of a crime?" A vein pulsed in Miller's temple. He hated lawyers. He especially hated lawyers who looked like her. He could smell the confidence, the education, the utter lack of fear on her, and it was like gasoline on a fire. "It's routine," he snapped, his hand drifting down to rest on the butt of his holstered firearm. A deliberate, calculated gesture of intimidation. Davis shifted his weight, his discomfort a palpable presence. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Evelyn sighed internally. This wasn't a man who would be swayed by legal precedent. This was a man looking for a fight. She slowly reached into her purse, retrieved her wallet, and handed over her driver's license. Miller snatched it from her fingers. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he read the name. "Evelyn Reed," he said, drawing out her name with a sneer. Well, well, the Evelyn Reed. The one who gets scum back on our streets. So, this wasn't random. This was personal. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "I'm a defense attorney, yes," Evelyn said, her voice turning a shade colder. "I uphold the Sixth Amendment, just as you are sworn to uphold the Fourth." The challenge, subtle as it was, made Miller's face flush a deep mottled red. He handed the license back, but he didn't leave. He and Davis stood over her like vultures. "So what are you really doing here, counselor?" Miller's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Waiting for a client? A drug deal going down behind the duck pond?" "I'm done answering your questions, Officer Miller," Evelyn said firmly. Her patience evaporated. She stood up, her 5'7" frame radiating an authority that had nothing to do with a badge. "You have no probable cause to detain me. If you are not arresting me, I'm leaving." "I decide when you leave," Miller snarled, stepping directly in her path. "Don't get smart with me." "It's not about being smart. It's about knowing my rights." She shot back, her voice ringing with the clarity of a courtroom objection. "And you are violating them." That was the final trigger. In a blur of motion, Miller lunged forward and grabbed her arm. The grip was brutal, fingers digging into her bicep like claws. A shock of pain and pure, unadulterated rage shot through Evelyn. "What are you doing?" she cried out, trying to wrench her arm free. "You're resisting arrest," he bellowed, for the benefit of the now gathering crowd of onlookers. The world tilted. The placid park scene fractured into chaos. Miller twisted her arm behind her back with a grunt of effort, forcing her forward. Her knees buckled and she stumbled, the rough gravel of the path scraping her skin. He shoved her face down onto the grass, the smell of damp earth and chlorophyll filling her nostrils. A heavy knee pressed into her back, knocking the wind from her lungs in a painful gasp. "Stop resisting!" he yelled again, though she was doing nothing but trying to breathe. From the periphery, she heard gasps from the crowd, the murmur of voices. Then, a new sound, a faint electronic chime. The unmistakable sound of a phone camera beginning to record. The cold, sharp click of handcuffs ratcheting around her wrists was a sound of absolute finality. Humiliation burned in her chest, hot and acidic, but beneath it, something else was crystallizing. A cold, hard diamond of fury. She was no longer a woman in a park. She was a case study. Exhibit A. As Miller and Davis hauled her to her feet, she twisted her head, her eyes desperately searching the crowd. She found him. A teenager, no older than 16, standing partially hidden behind an oak tree, his phone held up, the small red light of its camera glowing like a distant star. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. "Keep recording. Don't stop. Bear witness." The boy gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The heavy door of the police cruiser slammed shut, plunging Evelyn into the cramped, suffocating darkness of the back seat. The sound echoed across the park, a gunshot marking the end of the piece and the declaration of a war she never asked for, but would now be forced to win. The ride to the Oak Creek Police Department was a study in suffocating silence. In the front, Miller drove with a smug satisfaction, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror as if admiring a trophy. Davis stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on his lap, a statue carved from regret. Evelyn focused on her breathing, compartmentalizing the searing pain in her wrists and the deep, throbbing ache in her shoulder. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Anger was a tool to be sharpened, not wielded recklessly. Her mind, a finely tuned legal instrument, was already documenting every procedural violation, every sneering comment, every second she was unlawfully detained. The station smelled of stale coffee, industrial cleaner, and quiet desperation. The humiliation, she discovered, was not a singular event but a slow, grinding process designed to strip away one's identity layer by layer. They didn't just book her. They performed the booking for an invisible audience of their own prejudices. "Stand here," Miller commanded, shoving her toward a height chart on a grimy wall. The flash of the mugshot camera was blinding, a momentary starburst that left her seeing spots. He made her take it 3 times. "Try not to look so angry, counselor," he drawled. "It's not a good look." Next came the fingerprinting. He pressed her fingers into the sticky black ink with unnecessary force, then rolled them onto the card with a deliberate, almost intimate slowness. It was an act of dominance, a physical reminder that in this building, her degrees and her reputation meant nothing. She was just another number. Another set of prints in a system she fought from the outside every single day. Throughout the ordeal, Davis remained a ghost, performing his duties with a mechanical detachment, his gaze fixed on the floor, the paperwork, anywhere but at her. After they finished, they led her not to an interview room, but to a small, concrete holding cell. The fluorescent light on the ceiling hummed a monotonous, maddening tune. "Enjoy your stay," Miller said, the metal door clanging shut with a sound of chilling finality. The bolt slid home, a metallic punctuation mark on her stolen freedom. Alone in the cold, she sank onto the hard bench. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a raw, trembling exhaustion. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of it all. The shame, the helplessness, the burning injustice. A tear of pure rage traced a hot path down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. This was what they wanted, to break her. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She replayed the warning from her mentor, a legendary civil rights attorney, years ago. "Evelyn, the better you get, the more you win, the bigger the target on your back becomes. Never forget that the system you're fighting doesn't like to lose." She had never forgotten, but she had never imagined it would manifest like this. Not in a backroom deal or a courtroom maneuver, but in a violent, public stripping of her dignity in a sunlit park. 2 hours crawled by before the bolt slid back. It was a younger officer she didn't recognize. Reed, you made bail. Relief was a weak, watery thing. The real battle was just beginning. As she was escorted to the front desk to sign the release forms, she saw him. Marcus Vance, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the station's drabness, his face a thundercloud of controlled fury. He was her best friend, her law school confidant, and the sharpest legal mind she knew. Ev, he breathed, his eyes taking in the dirt on her clothes, the raw skin on her wrists. I came as soon as I got the call. Are you okay? I will be, she said, her voice raspy. She signed the last form, her hand shaking slightly. As Marcus dealt with the final details, Miller sauntered over, a smirk plastered on his face. Be seeing you in court, counselor. Try to show up on time. Evelyn ignored him, her gaze locking onto Davis, who was standing awkwardly near the water cooler, pretending to be absorbed in a flyer tacked to a bulletin board. This was her chance. She walked toward him, her steps measured. He tensed as she approached, his eyes darting toward Miller, who was now laughing with another officer. Why? Evelyn asked, her voice low and steady, meant for him alone. Davis wouldn't meet her eyes. He swallowed hard. I just do my job. That wasn't your job, she countered. That was an assault. So I'll ask again. Why me? He looked around frantically, his composure crumbling. He leaned in, his voice a panicked, barely audible whisper that smelled of fear and cheap coffee. It wasn't random, he hissed, his words tumbling out. The call. It came from dispatch, but it was a directive. We got orders to keep an eye on you, to check you out. That's all I know, I swear. Before she could press him further, he flinched as if burned, turned abruptly, and walked away, disappearing down a hallway. Evelyn stood frozen for a second, the world narrowing to the echo of his whispered words. Orders. A directive. This wasn't just two rogue cops on a power trip. This was organized. Someone had sent them after her. Someone had weaponized the police to target her specifically. The implications were staggering, sending a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the station's air conditioning. Ev, you ready? Marcus was beside her now, his hand gently on her elbow. She nodded, her mind racing. Let's go. The cool night air outside was a shock to her system, a welcome baptism after the stale atmosphere of the station. The city lights of Oak Creek seemed sharper, more predatory than they had that morning. As they got into Marcus's car, the silence was heavy with unspoken questions. Talk to me, Ev, he said finally, pulling away from the curb. What the hell happened? She told him everything. The stop, the questions, Miller's taunts, the assault. And then she told him what Davis had said. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight. A directive? They were sent? By who? That's the million-dollar question, she said, staring out at the blurred city lights. But we're going to find the answer. They drove straight to their firm. The building was dark and silent, a stark contrast to its daytime hustle. Evelyn walked into her office, the familiar scent of old books and paper a small comfort. Her gaze fell on the framed law degree hanging on the wall, Yale Law School. A piece of paper that represented years of sleepless nights, of fighting twice as hard to get half as far. It was a symbol of her climb, of her power. A power they had tried to strip from her today. She ran a hand over her bruised wrist, the faint, dark outline of the handcuff, a stark brand on her skin. The pain was no longer just physical. It was a deep, motivating force, cold as forged steel. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her. We file suit first thing in the morning. We'll burn them to the ground. Evelyn turned from the wall, her eyes, no longer filled with shock or humiliation, now blazed with a focused, terrifying fire. It was the same look she got in the final moments of a cross-examination, right before she dismantled a witness. No, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. A lawsuit is a reaction. We need to go on the offensive. This isn't just about two cops anymore. This is about who sent them. We're not just fighting a symptom, we're going after the disease. She walked to her desk and switched on her computer, the screen illuminating her face in its cool blue light. They picked a fight, she whispered, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. They just don't realize they picked it with the wrong person. The first blow landed at 6:17 a.m. It wasn't a physical strike, but a digital one. Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification from a local news aggregator. The headline was explosive. Prominent Oak Creek attorney in violent confrontation with police. Evelyn, who had been nursing a cup of coffee and strategizing on a whiteboard in their firm's conference room, felt a cold dread creep up her spine. "Play it," she said, her voice tight. Marcus tapped the link. The video filled the screen of his phone. It began abruptly, halfway through the encounter. There was no context of the officer's initial approach, no record of her calm, cooperative demeanor. The footage started at the exact moment her patience had snapped, her voice sharp and defiant. "It's not about being smart. It's about knowing my rights," her on-screen self declared, her face a mask of frustration. "And you are violating them." The camera, clearly shaky, as if held by an unsteady hand, then captured what followed, her trying to walk away, Miller grabbing her, her cry of shock. But without the preceding minutes, her actions could be misconstrued. She didn't look like a victim asserting her rights. She looked like an aggressor provoking a confrontation. The video ended with her on the ground, the officers struggling to cuff her, her face contorted in a mixture of pain and anger. It was a masterpiece of malicious editing. "They cut it," Marcus whispered, his face pale. They deliberately cut out the first 2 minutes. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By 8 a.m., the video was the top story on every local news site. By 9 a.m., it had been picked up by national blogs. The comment section was a cesspool of vitriol. "Arrogant lawyer thinks she's above the law. She got what she deserved. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Classic race baiter. Cops can't do their jobs anymore without someone crying rights." Her phone, which she'd left on her desk, began to vibrate incessantly with calls from reporters, unknown numbers, and even a few angry clients. The senior partners at Reed and Vance, a firm her own father had helped build, were already in damage control mode. "We need a statement, Evelyn," said Mr. Abernathy, the firm's elder statesman, his voice strained over the speakerphone in their emergency meeting. "Something to smooth this over." "There is nothing to smooth over," Evelyn countered, her voice dangerously calm. "I was assaulted. The video was manipulated." "The perception, Evelyn," he stressed, "is the reality. And right now the perception is that you brought this on yourself. It's affecting the firm's reputation. The threat was clear. Fix this, or you become a liability." But the carefully edited video was only the opening salvo. By noon, a coordinated smear campaign was in full swing. Anonymous accounts on social media began posting exposé on Evelyn. They twisted the details of her past cases, painting her not as a defense attorney, but as a criminal sympathizer who specialized in freeing dangerous felons on technicalities. They dredged up a pro bono case from a decade ago, where she had defended a young man accused of assaulting an officer, neglecting to mention. The young man was later fully exonerated when body cam footage proved the officer had perjured himself. It was surgical, it was professional, and it was terrifyingly effective. "This is not a random leak," Evelyn said, staring at a screen filled with her own character assassination. "This is a planned attack. Someone is feeding them this information. Someone is orchestrating this." Marcus paced the room like a caged tiger. The kid who filmed it, he must have sold the video, or someone got to him. Or, Evelyn mused, a chilling thought taking root, the person who filmed it was part of the setup from the beginning. They had to fight back, but a public statement would just be more chum in the water for the sharks. Denials would be seen as proof of guilt. They needed evidence. They needed the full, unedited video. "Forget the firm. Forget the public," Evelyn declared, a new, steely resolve in her voice. "We fight this in the courtroom, not the court of public opinion. Marcus, I want you to officially represent me. We're going to build a case that is so airtight, so undeniable, that it will expose not just the officers, but the entire rotten conspiracy behind this." She shut down her work email, silenced her phone, and severed her connection to the outside world. The noise was a distraction. Her focus had to be laser sharp. The smear campaign was designed to rattle her, to throw her off balance, to make her react emotionally. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Let them have the internet. She would take the law. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her office, a single email slipped through the filters she had set up. It was from an anonymous, encrypted address. There was no subject line. The body of the message contained only 8 words. A simple, chilling message that confirmed her deepest fears and solidified the stakes of the war she was now fighting. It read, "Walk away now, or you will lose everything." The anonymous threat was a declaration of war. Evelyn stared at the words on her screen, not with fear, but with a clarifying rage. They weren't just trying to discredit her, they were trying to silence her. Whoever was behind this was terrified of what she might uncover. "They're sloppy," she said to Marcus, her voice low. "Threats are for amateurs." "It means they're worried. It also means they're dangerous," Marcus countered, his brow furrowed. "We're not just dealing with a PR problem anymore. We need help. The kind of help the police won't give us." He knew a man. Elias Thorne was a legend in certain circles, a former cybercrimes detective for the OCPD, who had left the force after becoming disillusioned with its internal politics. Now, he was a private investigator, a digital ghost who could pull threads no one else could see. He operated out of a nondescript office above a ramen shop, surrounded by a fortress of servers and monitors. Elias was a man of few words, with eyes that seemed to see in code. When Evelyn and Marcus laid out the situation, he listened without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin. He watched the doctored video once, his expression unreadable. "The edit is crude, but effective," he stated, his voice a calm baritone. "Designed for maximum emotional impact, minimum factual context." The person who posted it used a layered VPN routed through 3 continents. Amateurs could trace it to Estonia. I can trace it to a coffee shop 2 miles from here. He paused. "But that's a dead end. The real work is finding the source footage. The kid in the park." "We don't know who he is," Marcus said, frustrated. "You don't." "I will," Elias replied with quiet confidence. "Give me 24 hours. While Elias hunted the digital phantom, he tasked Evelyn and Marcus with a more traditional line of inquiry, digging into the lives of officers Miller and Davis. "Every man has a weakness," Elias had said. "A debt, a grudge, a secret. Find it." They spent the day buried in public records, social media archives, and legal databases. The portrait of Officer Frank Miller was depressingly familiar. He had a string of civilian complaints filed against him for excessive force and verbal abuse, all of which had been dismissed after internal reviews. He was a classic bully with a badge, protected by a system that valued loyalty over accountability. Officer Ben Davis, however, was a different story. His record was clean. He was married, with a baby on the way, according to his wife's joyful social media posts. But as they dug deeper, a crack appeared in the perfect facade. Marcus, using a subscription service that aggregated financial data, found it, a series of recent, high-interest payday loans. And further digging revealed a connection to several online sports betting sites. Davis wasn't just in debt. He was in a deep, desperate hole. He was vulnerable. The next afternoon, Elias called. "I have him." He had isolated the teenager from park surveillance footage, run his image through facial recognition software, cross-referenced with local high school yearbooks, and found a match. Leo Martinez, a 16-year-old honor student. He lived just a few blocks from the park. Convincing Leo to talk was delicate. He was terrified, convinced that a gang of rogue cops would come after him and his family. Evelyn spoke to him not as a lawyer, but as someone who understood his fear. "They are counting on you being scared, Leo," she said, her voice gentle but firm as they sat in his family's living room. "They want you to hide. But that video you took, it's not just a video. It's the truth. And right now, the truth is the only thing that can protect me. And maybe it's the only thing that can protect you, too." Hesitantly, the boy handed over a USB drive. "I didn't send it to anyone," he said, his voice trembling. "It just appeared online. I swear." Back in Elias's office, they played the original, unedited footage on a large monitor. The difference was night and day. It clearly showed Evelyn's calm demeanor, the officer's escalating aggression, and the unprovoked nature of the attack. It was the silver bullet they needed to clear her name. "We've got them," Marcus said, a wave of relief washing over him. "We release this, and the whole narrative collapses." "Wait," Elias said, holding up a hand. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowed. "Go back, right before the officers arrive." Marcus scrubbed back through the footage. Leo had started filming the ducks on the pond before he ever noticed the commotion. The frame was wide, capturing a large swath of the park's entrance. "There," Elias said, pointing. A sleek, black sedan with heavily tinted windows and no front license plate cruised slowly past the park entrance. It was the kind of car that was designed to be anonymous, yet screamed official business. It slowed as it passed the bench where Evelyn was sitting, almost as if confirming a target. A few moments later, Miller and Davis's cruiser pulled up. Elias zoomed in on the reflection in the window of a parked car. For a split second, as the black sedan passed, the driver's face was partially visible. The image was distorted, blurry, but it was there. This wasn't a random directive from dispatch, Evelyn breathed, her heart pounding. This was a coordinated operation. That car was surveillance. The driver was a spotter. This changes everything, Marcus said. It's no longer just two cops in their department. This is a conspiracy. Evelyn stared at the blurry image of the face in the reflection. It was a ghost, a phantom, but it was a lead. A lawsuit isn't enough anymore, she said, her mind already racing ahead, formulating a new, more aggressive strategy. She turned to Marcus, her eyes glinting with a hard resolve. Don't file the civil suit yet. What, Ev? This is our chance to... No, she interrupted, her voice absolute. A lawsuit shows them our hand. We're not playing their game anymore. We're starting our own. Her gaze shifted back to the screen, to the ghost in the machine. First, we find out who was driving that car. Finding the identity of a ghost in a blurry reflection was impossible for almost anyone. But Elias Thorne was not almost anyone. He treated the distorted image like a complex puzzle, running it through proprietary deblurring and facial reconstruction algorithms he had developed himself. For 2 days, his servers hummed, processing terabytes of data, cross-referencing the fragmented image against every available database. DMV records, social media, even mugshot archives. Meanwhile, he put another tracker on the black sedan. Using traffic camera footage from the day of the incident, he painstakingly traced its path away from the park. The driver was clever, taking a circuitous route, but he made one mistake. He'd parked in a private garage downtown that used license plate recognition technology. Though the car had no front plate, the rear plate was captured. It was a rental, leased under a shell corporation. A dead end for most, but for Elias, it was a breadcrumb. The pieces finally clicked into place on the third day. Elias called Evelyn and Marcus to his office. On his main screen was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the reconstructed face from the video, still imperfect, but now recognizable. On the right was a clear, crisp photo. The match was undeniable. His name is Leo Petrov, Elias said. Small-time muscle, a few priors for assault and BE. He's a known associate of several unsavory characters. But here's the interesting part. He brought up another file. 6 years ago, Petrov was the key witness for the prosecution in a high-profile case, a witness handled by the district attorney's office. A cold premonition washed over Evelyn. Which prosecutor? She asked, already knowing the answer. Elias's eyes met hers. Jonathan Price. The name hung in the air like poison gas. Jonathan Price. A ruthless, ambitious prosecutor with a bulldog reputation and political aspirations. A man whose entire career was built on a tough-on-crime persona. And a man whom Evelyn had publicly and professionally humiliated 5 years ago. The memory was vivid. It was the Northwood murder trial. Price was prosecuting a young man, a community activist, for a murder he swore he didn't commit. The evidence was circumstantial, but Price had built a powerful narrative, painting the defendant as a violent radical. He was swaggering, confident, already tasting the conviction that would be another stepping stone toward the Attorney General's office. Then came the cross-examination. Evelyn, representing the defendant, had systematically dismantled the prosecution's case. With meticulous research and razor-sharp questioning, she had not only proven her client's alibi, but had also exposed that the police had ignored a more likely suspect and that Price's office had withheld exculpatory evidence. The jury acquitted her client in under an hour. Price was left standing in the courtroom, his case in ruins, his reputation tarnished, his face a mask of incandescent fury. He had never forgiven her. Price, Marcus breathed, connecting the dots. He has the motive. He has the connections. This whole thing, the directive to the cops, the smear campaign, it has his fingerprints all over it. This is revenge. It was a classic Jonathan Price move, not a direct attack, but a complex, indirect assault designed to destroy an opponent's credibility from the shadows. He couldn't beat her in the courtroom, so he was trying to burn her down outside of it. We have a theory, but we don't have proof, Evelyn said, her mind working furiously. We can't connect Price to Petrov or the cops directly. It's all circumstantial. Then we make it direct, she decided, a dangerous glint in her eye. He thinks he's untouchable. It's time someone reminded him that he's not. Ignoring Marcus's protests, Evelyn drove to the county courthouse. She found Price holding a press conference on the courthouse steps, pontificating about a recent gang bust. He was in his element, surrounded by cameras and reporters, projecting an aura of power and control. Evelyn waited until he was finished, until the crowd of reporters began to disperse. Then she walked toward him, her heels clicking purposefully on the stone steps. He saw her coming. A flicker of something: surprise, annoyance, maybe even fear crossed his face before being replaced by his usual arrogant smirk. "Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" "Cut the act, Jonathan," she said, her voice low and direct, stopping a few feet from him. "I know it was you." He feigned ignorance, raising an eyebrow. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "The park, Miller and Davis, the doctored video, the pet thug of yours, Leo Petrov, playing spotter in a black sedan." She listed each point like an indictment. It was a well-orchestrated hit piece. I have to admit, it was almost clever. Price's smirk didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "You're sounding paranoid, Evelyn. Maybe that little scuffle in the park rattled you more than you thought. You, of all people, should know the danger of making baseless accusations. And you, of all people, should know what happens when you leave a trail," she countered, stepping a little closer. "You're good, Price, but you're not that good. You got sloppy, and I will find the proof that connects you to this." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me give you some free legal advice. You're swimming in waters far too deep for you. You think this is about some old grudge from the Northwood case? That's quaint." He straightened up, his public smile returning as a reporter walked by. He adjusted his tie. "You're a brilliant lawyer, Reed," he said, his voice now carrying a distinct, chilling warning. "But you have no idea who you're really up against." He turned and walked away, leaving Evelyn standing on the steps, his final words echoing in her mind. It wasn't a denial. It was a confirmation. And a threat. "This isn't just about me," he had as much as said. The conspiracy was bigger than a personal vendetta. Price wasn't the puppet master. He was just another puppet. And someone else, someone far more powerful, was pulling the strings. The weight of it all was crushing Officer Ben Davis. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Evelyn Reed's face, not the defiant attorney from the doctored video, but the shocked, betrayed woman he had helped pin to the ground. The cold, hard reality of what he'd done was a sickness in his gut. His home, once a sanctuary, had become another kind of prison. His pregnant wife, Sarah, saw the change in him. He was quiet, jumpy, his nights plagued by sleeplessness. She knew something was wrong, but he fed her lies about stress at work, lies that tasted like ash in his mouth. How could he tell her he'd participated in a violent, unjust arrest? How could he explain the real reason he'd done it? The money. That was the hook. The online betting had started as a thrill, a way to blow off steam, but it had spiraled into a secret, shameful addiction. Soon, he was thousands of dollars in debt to a loan shark who made it clear that his collection methods were not legal or gentle. Then, a week before the incident in the park, he'd received an anonymous offer. An untraceable wire transfer had appeared in his account enough to clear his entire debt. The instructions that followed were simple and terrifying. "Officer Miller will give you orders regarding a woman named Evelyn Reed. You will follow them without question. If you do not, your debt will be reinstated, and your wife will learn of your habits. If you talk, worse things will happen." Miller had been the one to fill in the details, his eyes gleaming with malicious excitement. "We're just going to rattle her cage a bit," he'd said. "Teach the high and mighty lawyer a lesson." But Davis knew, from the moment they'd stepped out of the cruiser, that it was going to be more than that. Miller was a powder keg, and they were being paid to light the fuse. Now, the pressure was coming from all sides. Miller was a constant, menacing presence at the precinct, reminding him to keep his mouth shut. "We're partners in this," he'd hissed in the locker room. "You go down, I go down, and I'll make sure I take you with me." At the same time, the news was inescapable. The smear campaign against Evelyn had backfired in some circles, with civil rights groups now calling for an independent investigation. Davis felt like a man standing on a collapsing bridge, the ground crumbling away beneath his feet. He was trapped. Speaking up meant betraying Miller, angering the shadowy figure who had paid him off, and confessing his gambling addiction to his wife. Staying silent meant living with the crushing guilt, knowing he had helped ruin an innocent person's life for money. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. He was rocking the new crib he and Sarah had just assembled, imagining his unborn child sleeping peacefully in it. What kind of father would he be? A coward who sold his badge and his integrity? A man who stood by and watched while injustice was done? The image of his future child looking at him with shame was more than he could bear. His hand shaking, he retreated to the garage. He pulled out a cheap, prepaid burner phone he'd bought weeks ago, a small act of self-preservation. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number for Evelyn's law firm, his heart hammering against his ribs. He asked for her lawyer, Marcus Vance, his voice a choked whisper. "I have information," Davis stammered when Marcus came on the line. "About the arrest. About who was behind it." "Officer Davis?" Marcus's voice was sharp, instantly alert. "What information?" I can't talk long," Davis said, his eyes darting toward the street. "It wasn't just Miller's idea. Price. The prosecutor. He was the middleman. He passed along the orders." "Orders from who?" Marcus pressed, his voice urgent. "I don't know his name," Davis confessed, his voice cracking. "I never saw his face. They called him the architect. He's the one who paid off my debts. He's the one who wanted her discredited. He's powerful. Untouchable. Price is just his attack dog." A car cruised slowly down his street, its headlights momentarily sweeping across the garage door. Davis's blood ran cold. It was a dark sedan. It looked just like the one from the park. "They're watching me," he hissed into the phone, pure terror seizing him. "They know. Oh God, they know." "Davis, stay calm," Marcus commanded. "Where are you? We can protect you. We can get you to a safe place." But the panic had taken over. The car at the end of the street had stopped. Its engine was off. Two dark figures were sitting inside, watching his house. It was a message. "It's too late," Davis whispered, his voice dissolving into a sob of despair. "They're here." He ended the call abruptly, smashing the cheap plastic phone against the concrete floor. The line went dead, leaving Marcus Vance staring at his receiver, the silence on the other end more terrifying than any scream. The dead line on the other end of the phone felt like a premonition. Marcus tried calling the burner back, but it went straight to a disconnected message. He then tried Davis's personal cell and his precinct number. No answer. Officer Ben Davis had vanished. "He's either in hiding or he's been taken," Marcus said, pacing Evelyn's office like a caged animal. "Either way, our star witness is gone. And our timeline just evaporated," Evelyn replied, her mind working at high speed. The news about the architect had changed the equation entirely. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was about exposing a rot that went to the very heart of the city's power structure. The smear campaign, the threats, Davis's disappearance. It was all designed to intimidate them into silence. "They're trying to contain this," she reasoned, "which means they're vulnerable. They overplayed their hand by going after Davis. They're scared of what he knows." "What do we do?" Marcus asked. "We can't go to the OCPD. They're compromised. We can't go to the DA's office. Price runs it. We're on our own." "No," Evelyn said, a steely glint in her eyes. "We're not. We have one weapon left that they don't control. The truth." It was a monumental gamble, a Hail Mary pass in the final second of the game. They had a fragmented story, a corrupt prosecutor, a phantom mastermind called the architect, a missing cop. It was compelling, but it lacked the hard evidence to stand up in court. But she wasn't going to court. Not yet. She made a call. Not to a litigator or a judge, but to someone she had built a relationship of mutual trust with over years of careful, professional interaction. Sarah Jennings, an investigative reporter for the Oak Creek Chronicle. Sarah was old school, a Pulitzer-nominated journalist who valued integrity over sensationalism. They met that night in the quiet, empty press room of the newspaper. Evelyn laid out everything. She didn't hold back. She gave Sarah the unedited video, Elias Thorne's report on Officer Miller's record, the evidence linking Petrov to Price, and the chilling story of Officer Davis's final phone call and subsequent disappearance. Sarah listened, her pen flying across her notepad. She asked pointed, skeptical questions, probing for weaknesses in the narrative. But the evidence, though circumstantial, was overwhelming. "This is bigger than one attorney's wrongful arrest," Sarah said finally, her expression grim. "This is a story about the weaponization of our city's institutions. If you're right, this could bring down the whole house of cards." "That's the idea," Evelyn said. But you have to tell the whole story, Sarah. Not just my part. The system that protects men like Miller. The unchecked power of a prosecutor like Price. The fear that makes a man like Davis disappear. And the question of who the architect is. Are you sure you want to do this? Sarah asked, her gaze steady. Once this story is out there, there's no going back. You'll be painting a target on your back so big, they can't possibly miss. They've been aiming at that target since the moment I sat down on that park bench, Evelyn replied. The only thing I'm changing is that I'm finally shooting back. The story broke on a Thursday morning, not as a digital tidbit, but as a massive front-page expose under the headline, Oak Creek's Web of Corruption, an attorney's arrest, a missing cop, and the phantom architect. It was a bombshell. The full, unedited video of Evelyn's arrest was embedded in the online version. Its raw, brutal honesty, a stark contrast to the doctored clip that had circulated before. The story detailed Miller's history of complaints, Price's vendetta, and the desperate, fearful last words of Officer Davis. The city erupted. The narrative didn't just flip, it was turned inside out. Evelyn was no longer the arrogant lawyer. She was a victim who had dared to fight back against a corrupt system. Protesters, energized by the story's revelations, gathered on the steps of City Hall, their signs demanding answers and accountability. Where is Officer Davis? One read. Justice for Evelyn Reed, read another. Who is the architect? The pressure on Mayor Thompson became immense. His office was flooded with calls. The city council was in an uproar. The carefully maintained facade of Oak Creek as a clean, well-run city was cracking under the weight of the scandal. On Friday afternoon, flanked by the police chief and a grim-faced city attorney, Mayor Thompson held a press conference. He looked beleaguered, blindsided. The allegations raised in the Chronicle's report are deeply disturbing, he began, reading from a prepared statement. I want to assure the citizens of Oak Creek that we will not rest until we have the truth. He announced the immediate suspension of Officer Miller and a formal request for an independent state investigation into the district attorney's office. Then came the masterstroke of political survival. To restore public trust and ensure transparent oversight, the mayor declared, I am, by executive order, immediately forming a new, independent Citizens Police Oversight Commission. This commission will be granted unprecedented power to review departmental policies, investigate misconduct, and recommend disciplinary action. We will seek out our city's most respected and unimpeachable leaders to serve on it. The gamble had paid off beyond Evelyn's wildest dreams. She had wanted to start a conversation. Instead, she had started a revolution. The following Monday, a certified letter arrived at her office. It was printed on the official letterhead of the mayor's office. Inside was a formal invitation. It was a request for her to accept a nomination for a seat on the newly formed Citizens Police Oversight Commission. Evelyn held the letter in her hands, a slow smile spreading across her face. They had tried to eject her from the system, to make her an outcast. But in doing so, they had inadvertently given her the opportunity to rewrite its rules from the inside. A new, far more audacious plan began to form in her mind. This was no longer just about defense. This was about changing the very architecture of power in Oak Creek. While the city reeled from the political fallout, Elias Thorne was hunting for a ghost. He wasn't looking for Davis anymore. The feds had quietly taken over that search, a sure sign the case had escalated to a new level. Elias was hunting the architect. He started with a simple premise: power. The architect wasn't a street-level thug. He was someone with the influence to command a prosecutor and the resources to make a cop's debts disappear. He operated in the worlds of money, politics, and law. Elias began cross-referencing every known associate of Jonathan Price with a list of the city's most powerful figures. The list was long. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. At Evelyn's urging, Elias had started looking into her own caseload, searching for a motive bigger than Price's 5-year-old grudge. He said it wasn't about the Northwood case, Evelyn had insisted. What else could it be? For weeks, she had been preparing a complex civil suit against a major real estate developer over a controversial downtown rezoning project. It was a dense, document-heavy case involving land use permits, environmental impact reports, and shell corporations. It seemed a world away from a violent arrest in a park. But as Elias dug into the labyrinthine ownership structure of the development company, a single name kept reappearing, buried deep in the paperwork of a subsidiary LLC. A name that made Elias's blood run cold. A name from his list. He found Officer Davis at a rundown motel 3 towns over, registered under a false name. He wasn't kidnapped, he was hiding, terrified for his family's safety. Elias didn't go in with threats. He went in with an offer of real protection from federal marshals who were already closing in on the case. In the safety of a secured federal building, Davis finally told the whole story, confirming the name Elias had found. The architect was a man no one would ever suspect. He was a beloved public figure, a philanthropist, a champion of civic progress. He was City Councilman Arthur Vance, and he was Marcus Vance's uncle. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat in Evelyn's office, staring at the file Elias had compiled, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. Arthur Vance wasn't just his uncle. He was his mentor, the man who had inspired him to go to law school, the embodiment of integrity and public service. It was impossible. It couldn't be true. Why? Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse. Why would he do this? Because it was never about revenge, Evelyn said, her voice heavy with the grim satisfaction of a puzzle finally solved. It was about preemptive self-preservation. She spread the documents from her rezoning case across the conference table. On the surface, it was a dispute over building permits. But Evelyn had suspected something was wrong with the land acquisition. She'd spent months tracing the chain of ownership, and she was on the verge of uncovering the truth. Arthur Vance was the secret, majority partner in the development. The scheme was audacious. Using his position on the city council, he had pushed through zoning changes that dramatically increased the value of land he had secretly purchased on the cheap through a series of shell companies. He was set to make a 9-figure profit, a massive act of public corruption, hidden behind the veneer of civic improvement. This lawsuit, Evelyn explained, pointing to a stack of files, was the threat. I was digging into the land deals. I had subpoenaed financial records that would have eventually led to him. He knew I wouldn't stop until I found the truth. The park incident was never about the Northwood case. That was just a convenient pretext, a way to use Price's existing animosity as a tool. The real goal was to destroy Evelyn's credibility, to paint her as an unstable, radical attorney. Then, when she inevitably made her accusations about the land deal, no one would believe her. She would be dismissed as a disgraced lawyer, lashing out with wild, baseless claims. He used his own nephew's best friend, Marcus said, the betrayal a fresh wound. He thought of all the family dinners, the encouraging talks, the avuncular pride Arthur had always shown in his career. It was all a lie. His entire life, his entire perception of his family, had been built on a foundation of deceit. The choice he faced was excruciating: loyalty to his family or fealty to the law he had sworn to uphold. But looking at Evelyn, at the friend he had seen brutalized and slandered because of his own uncle's corruption, he knew there was no real choice at all. Armed with Davis's sworn testimony and the mountain of financial evidence Evelyn and Elias had compiled, they bypassed the local authorities entirely. They went directly to the regional office of the FBI. The end came swiftly. 2 days later, Arthur Vance was hosting his annual charity gala for the city's underprivileged youth. He was on stage, basking in the warm glow of the spotlight, accepting an award for his unwavering commitment to the community. As the applause echoed through the grand ballroom, 2 stone-faced FBI agents walked onto the stage. They moved with a quiet, unnerving purpose. They flanked Arthur Vance, leaned in, and spoke to him in low voices. The councilman's benevolent smile froze, then collapsed. The color drained from his face. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the audience as the agents discreetly but firmly escorted the city's most beloved philanthropist off the stage. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment of his downfall for the entire city to see. The architect's meticulously designed world had just come crashing down around him, and the woman he had tried to destroy was the one who held the wrecking ball. The arrest of Arthur Vance sent a seismic shockwave through Oak Creek, cracking the foundations of the city's political establishment. He was the architect not just of a corrupt land deal, but of the city's modern image. His downfall was a public spectacle, a precipitous fall from grace that dominated the news cycle for weeks. The dominoes fell quickly. Faced with a federal indictment and the damning testimony of Officer Davis, Jonathan Price's career imploded. He was placed on immediate leave from the DA's office, his political ambitions reduced to ash. A federal investigation was launched into his handling of not just the Northwood case, but his entire tenure, looking for other instances of prosecutorial misconduct. Officer Miller, stripped of his powerful protectors, was unceremoniously fired from the OCPD, his union's half-hearted defense crumbling in the face of public outrage and irrefutable evidence. In the midst of the chaos, Evelyn Reed became an unlikely symbol of integrity. The woman they had tried to brand as a radical pariah was now being hailed as a hero. She was profiled in national magazines and interviewed on evening news programs, but she consistently deflected personal praise, steering the conversation back to the systemic failures that had allowed men like Vance, Price, and Miller to flourish. Her appointment to the Citizens Police Oversight Commission was unanimously approved by the City Council, its members scrambling to appear on the right side of history. The first meeting was a chaotic affair, filled with politicians posturing and community activists demanding immediate sweeping changes. Evelyn sat through it all, listening, absorbing the anger and the fear and the hope in the room. That evening, Marcus found her in the firm's law library, surrounded by books on municipal law and police reform. Her original civil lawsuit against the city, Miller and Davis, was still pending, a powerful legal weapon waiting to be deployed. The city's attorneys called, Marcus said. They want to settle. They're terrified of discovery, of what else we might find. They're willing to offer a significant sum. 8 figures, maybe more. It was the victory they had initially set out to achieve. A massive settlement would be a public admission of guilt and a personal vindication for Evelyn. But as she looked at the mountain of research before her, she knew that money was no longer the point. A payout would treat the wound, but it wouldn't cure the disease. "We're not settling for cash," she said, her voice resolute. Marcus looked at her, confused. "Ev, this is the win. This is what we fought for." "No," she corrected him gently. "We fought for justice. And justice isn't a check. It's change." She had spent the last week drafting a different kind of settlement offer. It was a bold, audacious proposal that would leverage their lawsuit into something far more valuable than money: power. The power to reform. She pushed a document across the table to Marcus. It was a proposed consent decree, a legally binding agreement between her and the city of Oak Creek. In it, she offered to drop her multi-million-dollar lawsuit entirely. In exchange, the city would agree to grant the new Citizens Police Oversight Commission unprecedented authority and enact a sweeping set of reforms she had outlined. The list was extensive: a complete overhaul of the use of force policy, a mandatory early warning system to flag officers like Miller with multiple complaints, an independent investigative body within the commission, giving it the teeth to conduct its own inquiries into misconduct, and, most importantly, giving the commission final say on disciplinary actions for serious offenses. "They'll never agree to this," Marcus breathed, his eyes wide as he read the proposal. "You're asking them to voluntarily give up control of the police department. They're facing a federal investigation, a city in turmoil, and a lawsuit that could bankrupt their insurance carrier," Evelyn countered. "They're desperate, and desperation makes people amenable to radical solutions. This isn't a request. It's their only way out." The city's attorneys balked at first, calling the proposal an unconstitutional power grab, but Evelyn and Marcus held firm. They leaked the general terms of their non-monetary settlement offer to Sarah Jennings, who ran another front-page story: "Reed rejects millions. Delaware man's reform." The public support was overwhelming. The choice was clear. The city could either pay a massive settlement to one person, or it could invest in a solution that promised to fix the system for everyone. Politically, the mayor had no choice. A week later, in a packed press conference at City Hall, Mayor Thompson, flanked by Evelyn and Marcus, signed the historic consent decree. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic moment that represented a tectonic shift in the city's balance of power. Evelyn had sacrificed her personal payday for a public good. As the cameras flashed, Evelyn felt not triumph, but the immense weight of responsibility. She had been given the tools to reshape an entire institution. She had fought the system and won, not by destroying it, but by earning the right to rebuild it. In the first public meeting of the newly empowered commission, she was unanimously elected as its chairperson. Her first act was to place a specific case on the docket for their next hearing: the review of a request from a disgraced officer seeking to be reinstated to the force, an officer named Ben Davis. The hearing room was packed. It was a sterile, official space, but the air crackled with a tension that was deeply personal. This was the first major test of the newly empowered Citizens Police Oversight Commission, and the case on the docket was a crucible for everything the city had endured. Ben Davis sat at the witness table. He was no longer a police officer. He had been summarily dismissed after his role in the conspiracy came to light. The man who sat there now looked years older than the one who had stood in the park. The fear that had defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet, somber resignation. He wore a simple suit, not a uniform, and he looked small and exposed without it. He was appealing for a second chance, not for his old job back, but for a probationary, non-patrol position within the department. Evelyn sat at the center of the raised dais, the chairperson of the commission. She was no longer Evelyn Reed, the victim. She was not Evelyn Reed, the attorney. In this room, she was Madam Chair, the arbiter of a new kind of justice. She conducted the proceedings with a calm, impartial authority, her voice steady, her expression unreadable. The police union representative made a case for leniency, arguing that Davis was a pawn, coerced by powerful men, and that his eventual cooperation was instrumental in bringing down a massive criminal enterprise. The department's internal affairs captain argued against it, stating that Davis's actions had irrevocably broken the public trust and that his reinstatement in any capacity would send the wrong message. Then, it was Davis's turn to speak. He looked directly at the commission, his gaze eventually settling on Evelyn. There was no defiance, no pleading, only a profound, gut-wrenching shame. "I'm not here to make excuses," he began, his voice raspy but clear. "What I did was wrong. It was cowardly. I knew it was wrong when Officer Miller gave the order. I knew it was wrong when we approached Miss Reed. And I knew it was wrong every second I stood by and let it happen. I failed my oath, I failed this city, and I failed myself." He spoke of his gambling debt, not as an excuse, but as a confession of the weakness that had allowed the poison to seep in. He spoke of the fear for his family, but acknowledged that true courage would have been to face the consequences of his own actions from the start. "I helped powerful men try to destroy an innocent person because I was scared," he concluded, his eyes meeting Evelyn's directly. "There is no undoing that. All I can say is that the man who did that is not the man I want my son to know. If given a chance, any chance, I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back a fraction of the trust I threw away." The room was silent when he finished. The testimony was raw, unvarnished, and powerful. The commission members debated, their voices a low murmur. The vote was split down the middle, 3 for reinstatement on strict probation, 3 against. The final, deciding vote fell to the chairperson. It fell to Evelyn. Every eye in the room was on her. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the victim, now holding the fate of her attacker in her hands. The room buzzed with the unspoken expectation of retribution, of a final satisfying act of vengeance. Evelyn looked down at the documents before her, then she looked at Ben Davis. She saw not the monster from the park, but a broken man who had been forced to stare into the abyss of his own character and had finally, belatedly, found the courage to turn toward the light. She picked up her microphone. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, devoid of the oratorical flair of the courtroom. "Justice and accountability are not always synonymous with punishment," she began, her words carrying the weight of her entire ordeal. "Accountability is acknowledging the harm done and taking responsibility for it, which Mr. Davis has done. Justice, however, must also be about restoring the community and rebuilding the system." She paused, letting the words sink in. "A system that permanently discards anyone who makes a mistake, even a grievous one, is a brittle system. A system that can find a path for redemption, for someone who has demonstrated genuine remorse and can serve as a living lesson to others, that is a resilient one." She cast her vote. The motion carries. Mr. Davis will be reinstated on a 2-year, zero-tolerance probation. He will be assigned to the Community Outreach Division, and his primary duty will be to participate in police academy training, sharing his story with every new recruit as a stark warning of how easily an officer can lose their way. It was a verdict of stunning wisdom and grace. It was not forgiveness. It was not retribution. It was a constructive, forward-looking solution that served the man, the department, and the city. As the hearing adjourned, Evelyn walked out into the main hallway of City Hall. Marcus was waiting for her, a look of profound admiration on his face. "Arthur got 20 years in a federal penitentiary," he said quietly. "Price was disbarred. Miller is facing assault charges. And you gave the guy who helped them do it a second chance." "It wasn't for him," Evelyn said, watching the afternoon sun stream through the tall arched windows. "It was for the system. It was to prove that it can be better than it was." They walked out onto the steps of the building together, the same steps where she had confronted Jonathan Price. The city looked different now. It felt different. The air was clearer. The fight had been long and brutal, a trial by fire that had nearly consumed her. But she had emerged from the ashes, not unscathed, but stronger. She hadn't just won her case. She had created a legacy, a quiet, enduring monument not to victory, but to the stubborn, unyielding possibility of a more perfect justice.